So it's been quite a while since a totally new makeup line has excited me personally, and just last month, Versed Skincare announced that they were launching their own cosmetics line. If you're not familiar, Versed is a brand that launched back in 2019 that aimed to make clean skincare more accessible and affordable. One of their goals with launching this brand was to create skincare products based on what millennials wanted. And when they announced that they were coming out with makeup, I was really intrigued, which knowing now that it was made for me, a millennial, it makes a lot of sense. So today we're going to be talking about all of the different Versed makeup that I've tried. I have most of the products, so I'll be covering in detail what my experience has been like so far with each one. And there are definitely some standouts, I will say. Now, I don't know how I didn't know this. Maybe I had, but just forgotten, but Versed was actually founded by Catherine Power. And Catherine Power also founded Merit Beauty. If you're watching this channel, I assume that you're familiar with Merit Beauty because of its quick growth in the beauty industry. So Merit Beauty came onto the scene in 2021, I believe, as a vegan, cruelty-free brand that wanted to cater to the modern consumer looking for luxury and people who wanted fewer choices. They were on a mission to basically simplify your beauty routine with barely there makeup and natural beauty enhancing products. Now, if you're like me, the pieces of the puzzle are probably coming together. It feels almost like Versed makeup is the inexpensive version of Merit Beauty. And I have had some great luck with some products, and then there are ones that I just don't really care for. Okay, so let's first start off with the Multi-Serum Skin Tint SPF 40. This retails for $19.99 and it comes in 14 shades, and this is described as being a skin perfecting skin tint that's a nourishing serum with buildable coverage to correct uneven skin tone while feeling lightweight and give you a lit from within hydrating glow. It also says it stays put all day without clogging your pores or irritating your skin. And something to note that while this is a mineral SPF, it does contain butyloctyl salicylate, which is a UV filter stabilizer that enhances the performance of active sunscreen ingredients. And the reason this is important is because this ingredient also helps to thin out the texture of SPF products to make them feel more spreadable and like lightweight, which is why the skin tint still feels thin for a mineral sunscreen. But the problem with it is it's derived from salicylic acid. So if you are sensitive to chemical sunscreens, this one does have the potential to irritate the skin. So just keep that in mind. So I have the shade 60, which I think is actually a pretty good match for me right now. It does seem to be a tiny bit light for me. It matches my face fairly well, but my face is a lot lighter than the rest of my body. So I think in the summertime, this one might not be the best match for me. So if we're shade twins, that's just something for you to keep in mind. So I was actually really excited for this skin tint. To me, I kind of hoped that it would be similar to the CL Tint and Protect skin tint based on the description of it, because for me, that one is probably my favorite SPF skin tint out there. When I'm looking for something that looks extremely natural on the skin, it also feels really lightweight. But unfortunately, I didn't have great luck with this one. So it has a gel cream texture that spreads really thinly, so it feels almost like a moisturizer. So there's no heaviness to this at all. And if anything, I would say it has a good amount of hydrating properties to it. So initially I had tried it with the complexion brush, this one right here that they came out with as well. And I felt like the brush was just too dense and short to be able to like blend it out evenly and get good coverage. And I was also seeing a lot of brush strokes. So I thought like, okay, maybe it's the brush. So I tried it a few times with a few other brushes that I prefer using with like my skin tints and foundations and stuff. And I still felt like it was looking kind of heavy on the skin and wasn't really blending in. Like it felt light, but it looked a little heavy. You know how with a really good complexion product, when you blend it in, it almost like melts into the skin and becomes like one. This one kind of just sat on top of my skin and it looked like a layer of makeup on top. I even blended it with my fingers and then I buffed it in with a brush. I blended with my fingers and then I buffed with a sponge. I also tried to just apply it with a sponge and I really didn't have a lot of luck. It could be because my skincare is a little too slippery for it, but to be honest, I always wear a separate sunscreen before makeup, even if it has SPF, and no matter what sunscreen I used, it just never really looked that good. Now, it does have some great coverage for skin tint, I will give it that. I would say it's a pretty solid medium coverage, and you can definitely see like how well it covers hyperpigmentation and discoloration and uneven skin tone initially. But every time I wore it, I just felt like my makeup didn't look as great as I wanted to. It always kind of looked like something was off. Also, if I put other creams on top of it, it sort of would move the skin tint and would be able to see my hyperpigmentation, which you guys know is something that I personally look to cover with my complexion products. And for me, if I'm looking for that like no makeup look, or like that barely there makeup, then I'm gonna reach for lighter weight products like creams and liquids over any powders. So it was weird to me that this skin tint didn't work that well with those other formats. Now, this is a big asterisk because of course, if you don't have major hyperpigmentation or acne or anything like that you're trying to cover with your complexion product, then maybe you'll love this for its lightweight feel. But there's still that problem of it looking like a layer of makeup, you know? Maybe if you have like dry skin or normal skin or just not oily skin, then you wouldn't experience this one the way that I did. But I feel like it's been a long time since I've used any sort of foundation or skin tint that really gave me this much issue. And it's not terrible per se, but for my acne scarring, my sunspots, my oily skin, I just feel like it wasn't a good fit for me. So this one isn't one that I would personally recommend. Okay, so next is the serum concealer. So I bought the shade in 6.0 because the name of the shades of the concealer correspond to the skin tint shades, which is really nice. And this one comes in 14 shades as well, and it retails for $14.99. So this is supposed to be a weightless concealer that feels like a hydrating serum that gives medium coverage. Now this one feels very reminiscent to some of my favorite concealer formulas like the Kulfi Main Match Concealer and like the Kosas Revealer Concealer. I love a slightly creamy, lightweight but hydrating concealer personally, and it does have that serum-y texture to it where it feels a little bouncy and hydrating. I think the color is really nice, and for me, this one gives me a light medium coverage. I'd say it's on the lighter side of medium coverage, if that makes sense. I like to go in with one base layer, let that dry, and then go into specific areas like the creases of my under eye to get more coverage. I like this one enough, but I wouldn't say that it like blew me out of the water. I like it a lot more than the skin tint because this one, in contrast, actually does seem to seamlessly blend into the skin. So this also claims to be self-setting, and maybe that would be the case if you don't have oily skin or like creases under the eyes, but for me, I still find that I get the longest wear by setting this. And I could see this really shining for me if I purchased maybe a shade lighter and then I used it to like brighten the face. Like sometimes I'll go in with a shade matching concealer and then top it with a brighter concealer. And I think that since this one is that thin serum texture, it would top other concealers really well because it wouldn't look heavy or like you're wearing layers of makeup, you know? And then you would have that double layer of coverage too. So I do like this one. I think since I have it, I will definitely use it, but it's not gonna be my one and done concealer choice at the moment. Okay, so as for the bronzer stick, I won't lie, once I realized that Versed was a sister company to Merit, I got a little nervous about the bronzer stick because I really wanted to love the Merit bronzer stick. I even owned 2 different shades at one point, but I was just never really a fan. It was too lightly pigmented for me. It felt a little bit greasy and it kind of just completely blended away. So this bronzer stick from Versed, it comes in 3 shades and retails for $14.99. I bought the shade Away and I like the color. It's not too deep and not too warm. The description says it's made to be non-patchy and adds natural warmth to the skin. It's pretty creamy, but I will say it does have qualities of being sort of similar to the Merit one where it does feel slightly like a gel. However, this one I'm pretty sure is more pigmented, at least least to me, I feel like the pigmentation on this does stick around more than the Merit, but I also kind of want a little bit more pigmentation from this in general. I can get a natural warmed bronze look from this, which is really nice, but it's almost so natural that I'm kind of like, did it do anything? And in the same breath, I know I can't go a shade deeper because that one would just look too dark and muddy on me. You can build it up, but I will say that it generally looks more hydrating than pigmented. And for me, I find that those types of ratios, they just don't really build up as well or stick around on my skin as long. If a product's gonna be hydrating, then I still need some good color payoff. And this one I think might be slightly short on that. I also find that once I powder, it does tone this down a ton. So if you're looking for a very bronze look or something that pops on the cheeks when it comes to bronzer, then this one won't be the one for you. But if you don't typically use a lot of setting powder and you want something that looks virtually undetectable and you're not looking for much sculpting, because even though, you know, it's not a contour, bronzer just tends to add dimension to the skin anyways, then this one might be a good one for you. Again, I don't hate it, but I wasn't blown away by it. And as you can tell, my thoughts are still kind of all over the place with this one. So I do plan on testing it out more. Now the blush sticks, I knew that I immediately loved them. They come in 5 shades and I now own 4 out of 5 of them because I just loved them so much. And these retail for $14.99 as well. And it says that these are a multi-use buildable cream blush that's flexible and lightweight and also easy to layer. I love a multifunctional product, and these are not only really great colors on my cheeks, but it's also really nice on my lips. So the formula of these, you might assume that they would be the same as the bronzer stick, and while they utilize a majority of the same ingredients, they are listed differently. And because of that, I'm inclined to think that there are different levels of each ingredient. For me, these are definitely way more pigmented than the bronzer sticks, but at the same time, they aren't overly pigmented. If you've tried the Merit Flush Bombs, these would be similar in the way they blend out and for the most part, the way that they apply. But I do think these have less of a hydrated look to them once they're blended out, which honestly is a plus for me because I feel like I have a little bit more wear time out of this and they set down with powder really well. I also feel like a big selling point for me when it comes to creams or liquid blushes is how they layer with powder. And as you can imagine, with a lot of creams and liquids, once you layer powder on top, they do lose a ton of their intensity. And these are no exception. They definitely get more subtle, but they layer flawlessly on top of the powders. They don't like bunch up and move the powder on my face, and they're even more impactful on top of a powder than they are on like a wet base. I love how the intensity is so customizable with this, and I will say that these can be a little finicky in terms of layering it on top of concealer or like your complexion products. So for instance, with the Versed Skin Tint, that moved around and kind of like disappeared under these. So I was able to see my hyperpigmentation. Same with some concealers, but with my foundations that dry down slightly more matte or with concealers that have a higher coverage, I don't really have any issues seeing my hyperpigmentation once I put this on. But if you want to avoid that issue altogether, you can opt to wear this only on top of powder, which is what I did today, which I think is a good option since it blends pretty flawlessly on top. And then you have like that added benefit of having more of a hydrated, slightly sheen look to the skin that makes it look more natural. I would definitely recommend getting these. I mean, at $14.99, it's comparable to some high-end cream blushes that I own. I'm really enjoying these and getting a lot of good use out of them. So for the highlight stick, I purchased mine in the shade Baroque, which is a silver champagne shade, and these come in 3 shades and again is $14.99. We've seen an influx in highlight sticks lately and I feel like I've tried quite a few. So first, the formula of this. So as you can imagine, it's gonna be that solid cream texture that's meant to melt into the skin, and it says it has a superfine pearl that gives a natural dewy glow that feels like nothing and layers well over product. And the thing I like about this one is that that while it is that cream highlight formula, it doesn't feel greasy. And I think that a lot of earlier highlight sticks did have that sticky sort of like greasy feel to them. This one I won't say completely dries down since it needs to stay creamy in the stick format, but for all intents and purposes, this does dry down almost like 90%, I would say. If you touch it, there is of course like that slight tacky feeling, but it's not like a heavy layer of cream on the skin that my hair gets stuck to every chance it gets, or where it feels like it's just slipping all over your face, you know? Now I kind of wish that I had gone with the shade Simmer instead. If I had known how much lighter this was on my skin, I definitely think that Simmer would have been the way to go for me. In the marketing photos, it just looked like it would be too bronze on my skin, but now I feel like it would have been the shade to go for that natural lit from within look. The shade Broke is nice, but it's the more obvious highlight on my skin, like the most obvious color. If I were to compare this to the Merit highlight, I don't know. To be honest, I had those in my collection for so long and I was barely using them. I sometimes wish I kept at least one to compare to like all of these highlight sticks, but I think that kind of speaks for itself, you know? Like they weren't super memorable for me and I didn't feel the urge to use them when I had them. And I don't know if it's because these have a lower price point, but the Versed ones seem to feel a little bit more impressive to me than the Merit ones. I kind of think that these might dry down better than those did, but if you own both, please let us know a comparison of the two. Okay, let's talk about the liquid eyeshadows now. So these are $13.99 and they come in 5 different shades. I have the shade Vintage, which is a neutral brown, and Haze, which is a cool violet. It says, with the performance of a powder and the flexibility of a cream, this liquid eyeshadow adds a touch of sheen to the lids. Its soft shimmer formula can be worn on its own for a wash of color or layered for a bit of depth and dimension. Now, I love these shades. Vintage is definitely that shade that I gravitate towards when I'm looking for a one and done type of eyeshadow. I actually really like liquid eyeshadows. I don't find that they're typically too difficult to work with. I love that most of the time I don't need to use any eyeshadow primer, and for the most part, I like using them as like a one and done. So these were kind of mind-boggling to me in the sense that, again, it was sort of something I had to play around with a little more than usual to like figure out. So upon first swatch, these look super pigmented, and I will say when it comes to color with a liquid shadow, it does tend to kind of like morph and change as you blend it out. And I'll typically either go in with a brush or like my finger, and both will work well. But with these, I kind of had to use a brush. The weirdest thing was happening with these. When I tried to build up the pigment with my finger, they literally stuck to my finger and transferred from my eyelid to my finger, and virtually all the pigment went away. Oh, what the heck? It's on my finger now. It was so odd to me and I was so confused. Now, as far as blending goes, at least with a brush, these blend fairly well. They're not like the fastest drying liquid shadows that I've tried, which is nice because it gives me time to blend, but at the same time, some areas were kind of drying faster than others, almost creating a little bit of splotching. And when you're blending, you have to go in with the literal most feather light hand known to man in order to keep the pigment there. I almost had to like halfway blend it, then leave it alone for a few seconds before finishing the blend to give it a little bit of time to like settle so it didn't completely disappear. It was a very odd experience. It's kind of hard to explain. And also sometimes I'll swatch like the color on the back of my hand and pick up the product from there. But when I tried to do that with these, it gave me like no pigment and just all shimmer. Now I feel like with at least 2 layers of this, it went on and looked pretty even, so it wasn't a huge deal, but it's definitely something that I wanted to know. Now, to these liquid eyeshadows defense, the description does say that it's a touch of sheen. It doesn't promise like high impact pigment or anything like that. So again, in the same vein of this being simple, natural, everyday makeup, this is probably as natural as it's gonna get in terms of eyeshadows. I did try these topped with powder shadow, and I think I preferred that look, honestly. It gave a little bit more dimension, but I don't know if it was because I didn't use an eyeshadow primer or what, but my eyeshadow creased like crazy by the end of the night, so I do think that these will require some sort of eyeshadow primer. Okay, so now getting into my favorite product of the entire line. So it's no surprise that it's a lip product since I'm not hugely picky, but these were a standout the moment I used them. So I have the shade Bake, which is a warm beige, Gem, which is a rich cherry, and Compliment, which is a rosy taupe. These are $11.99 each, and it comes in 5 shades, and these are truly so beautiful. First of all, the packaging on these are a true delight. I love the gold packaging and the transparent top on these. And I really enjoy that slim, like clicky pen that most of these gloss bombs tend to have. It says that these are a sheer lip tint that gives the right amount of soft, glossy shine and a pop of color, and I 100% agree with that description. These have a slightly like sheer look to them, but just enough pigmentation and tons of beautiful glossiness. I wouldn't say that these are high shine, but they're definitely more on the lip gloss finish side of things. There is a little bit of like a minty tingle, but it's very minimal and hardly noticeable if I'm being honest. And also there's no scent to these either. They also have shea butter, which is one of my favorite ingredients in a lip product because it feels nice and hydrating while wearing on the lips. And also I don't feel like my lips are dried out whenever it fades away. And something to note is that these are not super melty lip serums. I hate when glossy bombs are just like chunking off and melting as you're applying them, you know? These have a good amount of solidity to them where you can comfortably apply them without it getting really messy. But honestly, what I think makes these so special are the colors and the color payoff combined. The shade Bake, which is in my purse right now, is the perfect warm nudie beige that warms up the skin in such a subtle way. And I don't think these are overly glossy or overly pigmented. They kind of just like match each other in both ways to where it just makes sense, if you know what I mean. So for instance, Gem, this one right here, is described as a rich cherry, but I feel like it's extremely wearable to the point where I would feel comfortable just throwing this on whenever. And typically if a red is too pigmented, then I would categorize it into like a bold lip look for me. But this, like I said, is such a no fuss lip color that's easy to throw on. And because of the color load, you can truly wear all of these shades either alone or with a lip liner or topping a lipstick. Big fan of the lip serums. I absolutely adore them. And I'll probably pick up the remaining shades because I've just enjoyed these thoroughly. Lastly, of the products I've tried is the Cashmere Color Smoothing Lip Blush. These are $10.99 each and they come in 5 colors. I have the shade Scene, which is a neutral pink, and then the shade Reserve, which is a brown berry. So these are almost like a lip color enhancer in the sense that it literally does look like a lip blush where it adds a wash of color and then like nothing else. There's no extra sheen to them. There's no noticeable mattifying effect. It just looks like bare lips with a beautiful blur of color to them, kind of like that movie lip effect, you know? So these contain shea butter, but much lower on the list than the gloss serums. And I would say what sets these apart to other blurred lip products for me is that they feel like your average sort of like waxy lip balm, you know? Like they don't feel like you're putting a matte lipstick on. If you've ever tried the Refi lip blush, it gives you a similar blurred effect, except those do feel less moisturizing than these do. The Refi ones also have a lot more pigment, while these have like a barely there type of pigment that's buildable to an extent. Like at their highest pigmentation, there's still a sheer wash of color. Now, with that being said, in my opinion, these to me aren't meant to be moisturizing lip balms. They just so happen to take on those characteristics the closest versus a lip gloss or like a lip oil or lipstick, you know? I'd say the intended use of this, in my opinion, is for that blurred blush aesthetic rather than using them as a lip balm. While these do have hydrating properties, I don't find that they're enough hydration for a whole day by itself. So I would recommend these if you're looking for that more matte blurred look, but you don't want to go for a matte lipstick because you find them drying. But also if you want something that has zero additional shine, because some tinted lip balms will still have that like extra shine to them, this is truly the epitome of that blurred soft lip look, and for the most part they're very comfortable. But if you're looking for hydration, I would just adjust my expectations and solely go for this for the look of them. Okay, so those are all my thoughts on the makeup products I've tried from Versed. Even though I've been testing the line since it launched, I still kind of feel like I have a lot of testing to do and like playing around to do, but I definitely wanted to get this video out to you guys in case you've been curious and want to know what my initial thoughts are. So just like with Merit, I think there are some serious winners within this line, and then some that are a bit more tricky to work with and to learn. It's interesting because with both lines, there's nothing that I absolutely hate. I just feel like this line along with the Merit one are catered to give a specific look, and I think it all depends on how you approach it and if it's meant for what you're looking for. I'd love to know if you guys have tried anything from the line or if you plan to, and as always, I will leave a video right here if you're interested in watching more of my content. But until the next time, you guys take care. Bye.